Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. This land is our land now. As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
Good evening, our fellow Guyanese, and welcome again to Globespan 24/7. I want to welcome all of our viewers that usually join us at Globespan 24/7. I also want to welcome any of the non-Guyanese that also logs on to our program. They also share a vision, they share the concern for the country, a lot of our fellow Caribbean nationals. So I really want to welcome all of you as we continue with Globespan 24/7. It has been our 7th year, and it's a program that where we are looking to bring in all voices, different opinions, different points of views, and all for the sake of us to be able to grow with a better Guyana. The gentlemen on this program tonight, we're talking about the secret for youth, but this also has to do with the secret of us being able to develop a better Guyana, and that's been a secret that's been eluding us for quite a while. But we do continue to invite all political parties, civil and religious leaders to share their opinions and address their concerns. We also want to invite you as our viewers to continue to connect with us, post your views, ask your questions, your comments. We welcome them. We also welcome that if you'd like to contact us at Globespan 24/7, you could email us. It's Globespan at support@globespan247.com. Let me repeat that. The email address is support@globespan24x7.com, and you could call us at 631-782-8624. Our program tonight, it's pegged on the Venezuelan issue, the ICJ that's currently unfolding for us. We also want to touch a little more on the gas to shore projects. We also want to go into some of the current affairs that are happening in Guyana and to Guyanese at large. Timothy Jonas has been our program very often. He's a cornerstone of Globespan 24/7. As a matter of fact, he has quite a bit of followers on Globespan 24/7. I'm sure many of you appreciate his candidness and his ability to dissect and put events into context so that everyone, the average person, could understand. I left this gentleman for last to introduce him because I want to extend our appreciation today at Globespan 24/7 for him to join us. He has been having some challenges, and I'll leave that up to him to talk about regarding his health. But it will be an injustice tonight if we do not recognize our Guyanese for what they have accomplished. So I just want to read some of his accomplishment. Dr. Ivla Lloyd Griffith is a fellow with the Caribbean Policy Consortium and Global Americans. He is also known as the Vice Chancellor of University of Guyana, the President of Fort Valley State University in Georgia, Provost of universities in Virginia and New York, and a Dean at Florida International University in Miami, a former President of the Caribbean Studies Association, He has testified before the U.S. Congress and served as a consultant to several U.S. and international organizations. So quite an accomplishment, has quite a track record, and it would be an injustice if I didn't read that to all of you. So I really want to express our gratitude on behalf of all the viewers of Globespan 24/7 for Dr. Ivla Griffith to join us here tonight. And I want to start off with Dr. Griffith. But before, I pose the question to him, I need to go to a video of the president, the acting president of Venezuela, Ms. Delcy Rodriguez. So Devin, please go to the video.
Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, has launched a stinging rebuke of the United Kingdom and Guyana at the International Court of Justice. According to British, of fraud and obstructing evidence, Rodriguez also took an opportunity to reject recent comments from the White House suggesting Venezuela could become the 51st U.S. state. Almar Roswell has the news.
The Peace Palace in The Hague served as the backdrop for a final week of intense oral arguments over the Essequibo, a 160,000 square kilometer territory rich in oil and minerals. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez personally led the Venezuelan delegation, submitting over 3,000 pages of evidence intended to nullify the 1899 arbitral award that set the current borders. Rodriguez claimed that the UK intentionally blocked Caracas from accessing archival evidence for decades. While favoring Guyana's legal team, she maintained that only direct negotiations rather than a court ruling could resolve the 127-year-old fraud.
El resultado de este proceso que busca llevar a la Corte a una situación vergonzosa como es pretender validar un fraude ocurrido hace 127 años, Venezuela no lo va a reconocer porque estaríamos nosotros mismos incurriendo en ilegalidad internacional. Y al final del camino solamente queda una opción. Esa opción es la negociación directa, esa opción es sentarnos las partes a resolver esta controversia territorial, y lo digo por el bien del futuro de Guyana, de Venezuela. Nuestros países están entrelazados, nuestros pueblos están entrelazados y será así por siempre.
The dispute has taken on a new dimension in recent months following the capture of former President Nicolas Maduro.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you. So, Dr. Griffith, I want to start off with you first. If you could just talk about your opinion, given your knowledge and your background, your experiences. How do you see the process that went through? Are you satisfied with the Guyana side presentation and anything that stands out from the Venezuelan side?
Thank you, Nohar, and good to be on again with you, Devin and Kim and colleagues, members of the team. I, for my own reasons, I've been following this case for a long time. And I've taken the opportunity at every occasion where there are oral hearings to listen to those hearings. And I've always had a particular point of pride in hearing the presentations from the Guyana team. That pride was repeated last week and this past Monday. Outstanding presentations. And one of the things that struck me about the Guyana team presentation on the 4th is, unlike what the Guyana team did before in previous hearings, this time Guyana took the studied opportunity to put the Essequibo territory in sociological context. Not only talking about the legal, juridical aspects of it, but sharing the reality that there are Guyanese over 313,000 in the Essequibo, according to the 2022 census. Sharing the harsh reality of what the resource base in the Essequibo is all about. So I'm very pleased with the presentation, and I followed the record over the years. I've accessed the documentation from the ICJ. But I also think it's important in my scholarly domain to pay close attention to the Venezuelan approach. And I followed what the team from Venezuela presented, especially the presentations from their Solicitor General and from the acting president. And three things struck me from the presentation by the acting president. He spoke at the closing on this past Monday. One, someone who comes to planet Earth and didn't have an opportunity to understand some of the backdrop of this dispute will think that this whole thing began with 1966 and the Geneva Agreement. Her sole focus is on the Geneva Agreement as a place to begin. That was a significant point of what her presentation was all about. It was also interesting, secondly, Nohar and Tim, to hear the repudiation, the unapologetic repudiation of the International Court of Justice. It was not even 2 minutes into her presentation, she began to talk about fraud. She began to talk about Guyana is approaching this ICJ as a way of avoiding its responsibility under the Geneva Agreement of 1966 February to really negotiate a political bargain. And I left the hearing on Monday with an anxiety about the future of the evolution of this saga, knowing that if you were to take her proposition seriously, assuming that the court makes the appropriate judgment and says the 1899 award is valid, that will not end the dispute with Venezuela. They are going to sue this matter because they don't think that court should be in this business. They don't think that the 1899 award's basis for coming before the ICJ is valid. They're focusing on needing a political settlement under the Geneva Agreement of 1966.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Griffith. To all of our viewers, Timothy Jonas, I don't remember, it was a year ago or 2 years ago, was on this program and did an extensive narrative on the history of this Venezuela, Guyana, the Venezuelan claim, and we have reposted it this week on Globespan 24/7. It's a very interesting piece, and I would encourage all of our viewers to go back and look at it. It really gives you an in-depth knowledge of how the overall situation between this Venezuelan claim and between Guyana. So, Mr. Timothy Jonas, Senior Counsel, what's your opinion? What's your takeaway from the trial process? Tim, you muted.
Thanks, Nohar. Okay, I know that everybody's emotions and feelings are high. Everybody's feelings run high. And it's an unfortunate reality of the human condition that too often you take strong views with not enough information. So because we're all patriots, we would all stand and fall and argue right or wrong for Guyana. And I want Guyanese to understand that because Venezuelans are patriots, right or wrong, they will argue for Venezuela. We are, in my view, in the right in this case. But I want to urge people that it is not an argument that should be conducted with vitriol, with emotion, with rancor. It's an argument that always should be confined to cold facts, to hard facts, and to the information that is available to hand. Because as soon as we go to vitriol and rancor and aggression, we first of all lose sight of justice. And because I am satisfied that legally speaking, we're in the right, it doesn't help us to move away from the cold rational conversation. So the 1966 Geneva Agreement did not set aside or question the 1899 award. What it did is it recognized that Venezuela was raising issues about that award. And it said, we'll talk about it. So that agreement can't be relied on to argue that the arbitral award has a problem. What the ICJ needs to look at is the arbitral award and the evidence that Venezuela puts forward, that Venezuela relies on, to vitiate the arbitral award. And that evidence is woefully thin. That evidence is to the point of pathetic. So every time that the leader of Venezuela uses as her starting point the 1966 Geneva Agreement, she's starting at the wrong point. The starting point, and what the ICJ, I believe, will be looking at, is what is the effect of the arbitral award? Was it properly legally entered into? Was it properly legally pursued? And was the decision arrived at properly and legally? And is it binding on the two countries? I don't think that there's much doubt what the conclusion is there. I think that our position will be vindicated. I like what Ivla said, although it doesn't speak to the validity of the agreement as at 1899. It is important for all parties and all citizens to recognize that after that award, Venezuela recognized it. People have been sharing on social media stamps issued by the Venezuelan government showing its boundaries as per the 1899 award. There's no better recognition of the boundary than that. Guyana has since 1966 been holding elections. People in Essequibo have been voting in Guyana elections, have been granting birth certificates, citizenship, all of those things to people in Essequibo, have been exercising sovereignty in Essequibo. Venezuela has not. So there has been a regular, consistent exercise of sovereignty by Guyana in Essequibo as a result of the 1899 award, without exception. And that is equally important because it shows a ratification and an acquiescence by Venezuela. They're on thin ice. I think the larger question is what happens when a position is vindicated by the ICJ. How is a country, unlike a person, when a judge tells you that you're wrong and sentences you to 5 years in jail, there's not much you can do. You have a whole police force and a whole prison service dealing with you. How can a country that is sovereign and has a military and has its own power be held bound to what judges in the ICJ sign on a piece of paper and say should happen? And I think that's a question we got to think about.
And I want to dovetail from Timothy Jonas, the question he posed, Dr. Griffith. Guys like Nohar Singh, they don't have the luxury of putting things in context like Timothy Jonas, and don't have emotions involved. I mean, many of us, we have our emotions involved. It's 1/3 of our country here that you guys they're talking about. She was in CARICOM flaunting the brooch. I mean, it raises the whole spirit of, uneasiness. So the question, dovetailing from Timothy Jonas, what he posed is that 2 weeks ago, I alluded in this program that did we miss an opportunity, Dr. Griffith? Here's my point. What the point I'm trying to make. Did we miss an opportunity when the United States government was making their moves to get rid of Maduro? They needed the sovereign country of Guyana access airspace, probably through the land. They certainly needed logistic support from Guyana. Was there an opportunity, you think, or should we have, or is there, that we are not aware of, some sort of a security agreement? Because now that the United States, what we would be deemed as the big bully, has been moved out of our region, we are left there with the sitting government that still have a claim over Guyana. So going past the what would be more or less a judgment in favor of Guyana, which we are all hoping, and we know that's going to happen. We speak it in a positive way, that the judgment will be in favor of Guyana. What does the Guyanese, how would you give the Guyanese people an assurance, or how can Guyana be assured that the sovereign integrity will be in place?
Good question. But before I answer that question, I want to go back to something that Tim said, and that is the important aspect of the prolonged recognition by Venezuela from 1899 up until 1962 But it was not only a Venezuelan recognition of that arbitral award that led to a boundary delimitation in 1905. It was also recognition by states other than Guyana and Venezuela. We all know that there is a part of the geography of South America that sees a joint boundary, a tripartite boundary involving Brazil. So the recognition of 1899's validity is a recognition that extends beyond Venezuela. It has extended for decades to Brazil. And the implication of a reconfiguration of that border, implication goes beyond a Guyana-Venezuela bilateral dynamic. It involves changing the border dynamic with Brazil. And probably, as you know, Nohar, Brazil has a border with every country in South America except two. And many of those countries have problems with the Brazilian border. But you think of what the implications of redefining Guyana, Venezuela, reopening that border would mean for Brazil and other South American countries. So I think the recognition aspect, and the prolonged acceptance by Venezuela and other proximate states is important. And it is not only a recognition over an extended period of time. If you peel the onion back and ask yourself, what was the run-up to that 1899 arbitration, the 1897 treaty? What was the run-up to that treaty? The run-up to that treaty brings us to come to a term that we've been hearing a lot since the advent of the second Trump administration. That is the Monroe Doctrine. Venezuela used the very Monroe Doctrine enunciated first in 1823 to say to the United States, you gotta help us against these big bad British guys. And if you look at the evidence of the manifestation of that use of the Monroe Doctrine, one bit of evidence is when you ask the question, who were the Venezuelan arbitrators in that panel? The Venezuelan arbitrators were Americans, two United States Supreme Court justices. So you've got to ask yourself, why is it they're ignoring all that history? And they're latching on to 1966 February Geneva Agreement. There is more in the mortar than the pestle, as is said in parts of agricultural communities. I don't think it was a missed opportunity in the part of Guyana in relation to anything that the United States did with Nicolas Maduro. I think Guyana prides itself, as it should pride itself, on being an advocate and a respecter of the rule of law. And so once we started in March of 2018 with the imprimatur of the Secretary General of the United Nations, that journey to the ICJ, it's important that we allow that journey to play itself out. And I think it was a studious decision not to get involved. I think there are other reasons why Guyana would want to be prudent in any decision to have physical American bases. Physical American bases in Guyana's territory by the United States will open Pandora's box with regard to United States militarization in the Americas in ways in which the discomfort would be significantly not in our interests. So I don't think Guyana did anything wrong by letting it be. Venezuela and the United States have a bilateral issue, or United States has an issue with Venezuela, they do what they did. Guyana should not get involved in that. Now, that does not mean that Guyana should not pursue, as Guyana has been doing, security relationships with countries in the hemisphere and beyond the hemisphere. So I think that it's appropriate for Guyana to have done what it did. You can always question whether Guyana did enough for its own domestic concern. You know, for years, Nohar and Tim, I've been arguing that we have not in Guyana been doing enough public education of our own citizens. You know, we got a no blade of grass. Now and then we make a little fuss, but there's not been for decades any consistent education of the value of the Essequibo, what's at stake, who are the people there. And I remembered, and this is my final point, my first visit to Venezuela in 1981, I was struck by the frequency with which I was hearing the national anthem playing. When I got to one of the bodegas the next day, all these maps showing Zona en Reclamación, Essequibo. And Venezuela had a long campaign of educating its people in the civic space, in their educational system. One of my sisters-in-law is Venezuelan. And she grew up, not in Caracas, but in another part of Venezuela. He grew up learning about La Zona en Reclamación. We had not done enough in Guyana to really peel the onion back and explain the intricacies of what this claim is and who we are. We take for granted that Essequibo is ours. So I don't fault the government for not doing more with regard to the Maduro thing. That is a U.S. bilateral issue. I think we were wise not to get involved directly in that.
Well, that's really a very good point Dr. Griffith made about educating our citizens and our people with respect to, you know, our borders. Just a few comments. Mr. John Jones mentioned the judgment might be in favor of Guyana, but will the Venezuelan accept it? And that's the point we are actually addressing. I know that Mr. Neville Sital is on, and it looks like he had a few banks beer tonight as well. In addition to that, there's some additional comments. Ms. Taylor saying good night to Mr. Jonas, and some other folks saying good night to us. To the point of educating, Timothy Jonas, you've stressed that many times too, and you've also talked about a military base in the Essequibo as a way of prevention for us. Dr. Griffith mentioned about a blade of grass, and I seen on Facebook post Venezuela have water tank, Guyana has water tanks. How do the Guyanese, how do you give a reassurance to the Guyanese them in terms of post-judgment in favor of Guyana that Venezuela, big bully next door to us, will not be marching over? Or do surgical strikes?
Okay, that's a good question. And going back to the education point, more and more, I hear people throwing out criticisms in situations which I suspect they don't have solutions to offer. And there are some problems that are simply larger than you. So starting with what I've talked about with the education, will disagree with him on this point. You see, yes, the Venezuelans, when you look at their flag, their map talk about zone of the reclamation. But when you look at the Guyana map, every Guyanese school child learns that without doubt, there's never been a doubt, never been an issue raised. Essequibo belongs to Guyana. There are 10 regions. Regions 1 and 9 are up there in Essequibo. There are boat rides that you go down the Essequibo River that they claim. Lethem, Matthews Ridge, all of those places that you fly to or travel to by boat. The ferry that takes you all the way to Pomeroon and further. So to talk about education, I think might be a bit redundant. My generation will remember the exercise books you used to buy when you go into school. Unfortunately, some showed a picture of Burnham, who felt he needed to be deified, but others showed a map of Guyana, which is familiar to all of us. I don't know what more you can do besides that positive assertion that this is what Guyana is. No one is saying we should educate our people more about how the border with Brazil came about, or how the border with Suriname came about, even though there was the New River Triangle issue. That's not now on the table, and therefore nobody talks about it, because we all know in our minds what the map of Guyana is. That's the best education that could have been done. And I don't know how it could have been improved on. So as to more firmly entrench or more firmly create the sense of patriotism and the sense of loyalty that we're already seeing. I do agree that the trivia, the silly comments, not a blade of grass, and the little sound bites were nonsensical, but to its credit, the government very quickly heard the point that it needed to be more informative and more educational when the situation first arose. And there were some programs that came out that talked about the history and explained the situation. And the public that were already up in arms that this belonged to us, therefore were given the material to vindicate their positions. So I don't criticize anyone for that. I think that as much was done as could be done, and that's fine. Insofar as you say, well, what happens if Venezuela ignores the order of the ICJ? Again, the question is, well, before you try to criticize, what would you do in their place? And I got to say this, that starting with the APNU government when the issue first arose and it went to the ICJ, with the help of Carl Greenwich and Ralph Ramkoran working together, and to today, both governments in turn have done a stellar job, have done a really good job in keeping the discussion sanitized and based in law, in international law, in following the processes that are made available under the United Nations Charter going to the ICJ, in maintaining a calm diplomatic tone, avoiding saber rattling, because any saber rattling, we lose that fight, and there's no getting around that. And I really think they've done the best that they can. So if we are faced in the future with a situation that Venezuela says publicly they defy the ICJ and will have nothing to do with the ICJ decision, I think that the best that can be done is what is being done now, that we use diplomatic efforts, we try to find a consolidated position as we did in CARICOM, as we did with the US, as we did with the OAS, to isolate Venezuela diplomatically and embarrass anybody that tries to show that they are siding with Venezuela, because Venezuela in law, in history, in their approach is way out on a limb, legally speaking. And I think that Committee of Nations will lend to a diplomatic situation that if they try to push that, they'll be isolated. I think the government has done a good job doing that so far, and I think that's the only and best bet that they have to continue to pursue that. You're muted, Noah.
Yeah, just a sidebar note for Ms. Laura George, segueing from the actual topic of Venezuela, but on the topic of education in itself, she's saying, good night. Education must also include the historical occupation of indigenous people and the issue of displacement. We cannot pretend that this historical injustice did not happen. In addition, awareness sessions need to be held in public places, for example, public readings and our history. So it's in the context of education, but certainly not in the Venezuelan. Dr. Griffith, you'll be happy to hear that Mr. John Jones also agrees with you. That wonderfully said, Dr. Griffith. And he mentioned two individuals are pushing a false narrative of that government should have an American military base in the Essequibo. He mentioned Dr. Bisram and Ravi as being the two individuals. I don't know how accurate that is, but certainly he gets to your point. So our viewers, we want to move on to the next topic. And the next topic really has to do a continuation of the Gas to Shore project. Why is Globespan bringing up this project again is mainly because of the size of these projects, the amount of money that are being spent, and certainly we are not questioning the need of the project itself, but certainly we would like to know also if there is more expenditure that would help to develop the human side, the well-being of the Guyanese people, the lifestyle, the level of their living conditions. So I want to go back to, we did 3 videos in the last in the last program we had. I just want to select one of those videos to give some of our viewers the just recapping what we discussed the last time. So Devin, could you go to that video, please?
First major upward revision came in 2022, when budget documents and project details became clearer. At that stage, the pipeline was estimated at around $800 million to $1 billion, while the power plant and natural gas liquids facility were estimated at about $520 million. That pushed the project to more than $1.3 billion, which showed that the earlier $900 million public estimate was no longer the full picture. During the formal contract stage in 2022 and 2023, the numbers increased again. The pipeline was placed at roughly $1 billion to $1.1 billion, while the Wales power plant and NGL facility were finalized at $759 million. That brought the core project cost to around $1.7 billion to $2 billion. Then, in 2025, transmission costs were added at $422 million. It should also be noted that ExxonMobil completed the offshore pipeline in 2024. So the cost movement looks like this. In 2021, the original public pitch was around $900 million. By 2022, the estimate had moved to about $1.3 billion. By 2023 and 2024, the formal project structure had increased to roughly $1.7 billion to $2 billion. And today, estimates for a fully loaded system cost could potentially reach over $2.2 billion.
So that's a recap of what we cut as a video, was informative video from the last program. Now, since the last program, there's been a second announcement that there will be a second gas-to-shore project in the Berbice area. So to kind of get an understanding of this, there's no real figures that has come out of this second gas-to-shore project yet. But the first one started off at 759 million, and it's just over $2 billion at this point. The coming of a second gas-to-shore project, the only figure that has come out so far is the pipeline in itself, according to Exxon, will be over $2 billion. So here we are again, a second project that probably is going to be over $3 billion or probably even more. In addition to that, we know there was a first attempt with the Amelia Falls hydropower. Now, the project number one never came to fruition. That was estimated to be anywhere from $800 to $900 million. Now they're opening up bids for a second project, Amelia Falls. So total, I mean, here we are, could be anything over $7 to $10 billion that are being spent. At the same time, on the other side, or within that, Dr. Griffith, I guess what the question is coming, with all that has happened with the first project, anything that was learned from the first project, what advice or what comments you could make towards this upcoming additional projects for gas to shore that should be put in place so we are not seeing these major cost overrun?
Let me make two observations, one of which will likely not be directly on the Amelia Falls or gas to shore project. It's a general comment of what the reality is in major projects similar to the ones that are under consideration. It's not unknown that cost overruns tend to be a feature of major projects. But when you've got significant cost projection changes over time, when the project is not even 90% near completion, there is legitimate cause for concern on several fronts. Cause for concern with regard to any potential corruption that may be featuring in that reality of changing cost dynamics. Cause for concern as to whether or not there is any management deficiencies in the design of the project and likely deficiencies in the implementation of the project. That's my general observation. But here's my second observation. You know what? You're likely to run the promotion of this book published last year, Oil and Climate Change in Guyana's Wet Neighborhood. And one of the things I end the book with is a lamentation about the extent to which so many Guyanese are not paying close attention to the dynamics of the oil practices, both on the part of the industry and on the part of the government. And so I'm delighted to see that there is scrutiny, pushback, inquiry, insistence for not only explanations of costs, but also explanations of project design and project implementation. And I commend the civic organizations, I commend the people in the civic society, I commend the journalists, notwithstanding the difficulty of getting adequate professionalism in the context of some of the political realities of Guyana, for wanting to keep this matter alive, because the concerns legitimately are there. You may not necessarily have the proof that there's corruption, but there's a recognition of what Guyana has been for a number of projects, and the cause for concern about whether or not there is any deficiencies in the design, deficiency in implementation, that may result, among other things, in cost overruns of significant kind. Those would be my observations on that, Laura.
Timothy Jonas, did we learn anything from Project 1? Anything that could be a takeaway into Project number 2? And then, of course, following that will be Amelia Falls. You're muted, Tim.
You're muted, Tim.
For me, the biggest concern, Noah, you're speaking about did we learn, as if this is a team effort and we're all participating and putting our shoulder to the wheel, but it's not a team effort. We are being dictated to. There are shepherds and sheep, and the fact is that some of these shepherds looking like wolves. Now, you put up figures there showing $2 billion expense as part of this gas to shore project. And those figures were what you were able to distill from the outside looking in, from information that is, filtered to you and in dribs and drabs. But I'm not satisfied myself that that's the full story, again, from the outside looking in. You see, I came across something that I found interesting. If you look at information on GPL itself, from 2021 to 2024, and then from 2023 to 2028, you will see that GPL has been touting a development and expansion project. They call it, and I'm reading, to modernize its grid. Now, when you talk about modernizing your grid, what you're talking about is transmission systems. And the cost which has been published for this development and expansion project by GPL is $750 million US. Now, to my mind, if you have a project that's going on in Wales or a generation focal point that everybody is saying, and we've all said, well, you got to consider how that electricity is going to be distributed, what your transmission system is. And we're not seeing it sufficiently factored into the budget that you're touting as the cost of the gas to shore project. And we're not seeing how you're validating a position that you can reduce cost of electricity when you finally start generating based on the figures and the exponential increase in the budget and the actual cost. And then I see that over the same timeline, $720 million is allocated to GPL for development and expansion. And I then asked the question, well, is this really GPL development and expansion, or is this intended to segue and quietly inure to the assistance of the Gas to Shore project? Which, if it is, nothing's wrong with that, but it needs to be transparently informed to the public. Why is GPL spending $720 million US over the same period of time that the Gas to Shore project is going on to change its grid system, unless it is being done for the sake of fitting on to whatever new design is there from the Gas to Shore project, in which case this should be part of the Gas to Shore budget, not GPL's budget. So we're on the outside looking in, and all we're doing is speculating. I am aware that the consumption of electricity in Guyana has expanded enormously. Instead of 2-story small houses, you now have, 6, 7, 8-story buildings going up. You have townhouses, you have air conditioning, and large industries that require power. So it is good to have anticipated the increase in electrical consumption and electrical demand, which will be nationwide. But if you have budgeted, when you started the Wales Gas to Shore project, for a specific electricity demand, and you have budgeted to say, well, by supplying this demand, we will earn this much revenue and therefore can repay our investment costs from that demand. Are you splitting the demand in two when you create another Gas to Shore project in Berbice, and therefore reducing what the actual demand for electrical generation will be from Wales? We don't know. We're on the outside looking in, and all we're doing is speculating about the maths. But it looks more and more and more risky because of this deadly silence from the powers that be. And it would be lovely to have real information in a forum like this, where somebody can come and have a discussion and ask questions. I'm sure that everybody looking will realize Nohar Singh is not going to be obdurate and unpleasant in asking questions of somebody who is kind enough to come on the program to enlighten us. They will be treated respectfully. Come on and tell us about it. But we get silence. And I think that's the largest problem.
And going back into the I think it's the 2020 election, many of them used to be on this program, and everyone was treated with respect. I don't think we disrespected anyone, but certainly we are not going to be a chorus. In the context of dollars, though, I mean, if we're talking about Gas to Shore project number 1, number 2, Amelia Falls, etc., and it hits anywhere close to $7 billion, that's 1.5 trillion Guyana dollars. If it hits $10 billion, it's over 2 trillion Guyana dollars. So Timothy Jonas mentioned that I frame my question is from a point of view that we are involved, and I believe that's something that many citizens, not only in the United States, but all over the world, needs to be involved in these mega projects. There needs to be consultation. There needs to be a feasibility study by established companies with credibility. And definitely there need to be parliamentary committees for hearing. I just want to go to the videos just to show our viewers what transpire in the United States of America, and Dr. Griffith will know this very well as well, when it comes to supplementary budgets, additional money for any major expenditures. So Devin, could you go to that video, please?
And questions, again, ought to be here. Transparency begins here. Oversight begins here. And mandatory spending avoids the responsibility this committee has to report to the American people on how our money is being spent. So I just, again, want to stress how important it is. I appreciate my friend Mr. Elsey's comments about the $1.5 trillion request. If it is so obvious to everyone and to the American people that that's the dollar amount we need, we ought not be going through this mandatory, discretionary, supplemental. Let's put it all on the table and let's make the case to the American people.
So Dr. Griffith, going back to that point you made regarding Venezuela and educating the folks, Timothy Jonas will always say on this program as well that there's always the 6-seat majority, etc., etc. How do we get this message across to the people? I mean, if you're talking about a lot of money that could literally change their lives. I mean, you have people's homes being flooded out. You have so many other means that needs to be improved for the Guyanese people. And no one is against infrastructure, I think, but everyone is looking for a balance between infrastructure and human structure in building that part. How do we get these points across to the Guyanese people that there need to be more accountability, as Neville Seatal just wrote? There's no accountability. Oh, by the way, he also mentioned he does not drink, and he says I'm from Gujarat. So, Dr. Griffith, it's a struggle. It is a struggle, but we need to get across to the people and even the ones that supporting PPP supporters, PNC supporters, WIN supporters, they all need to be able to question from within.
I'm going to bet you 100,000 Guyana dollars of Tim's money.
Tim's money, okay.
That the question that you're asking about how you get the people is a question which, if you ask the members of parliament, you get vacuums of knowledge. I think part of our challenge is we manage our political institutions in a rubber stamp fashion. The money I'll bet you of Tim's points to what I suspect, what I know in other elements, not on this specific matter, that members of our parliament themselves are not au fait with the what and the whys and the whens. They are given scripts, they're given instructions on voting, and not with a deep educational consciousness of what the issues are. So I think part of the educational project for the people should begin with the people's representatives. When last have there been functional parliamentary committees in Guyana's National Assembly? What is the educational value brought to those committee members? I want to use a personal experience to make a point. When I was president of an American university, a good friend of mine at the time was U.S. Ambassador to Guyana, Brent Hart. Brent invited me down. Abla, I want to honor you. One of the things he arranged when I was in Guyana was 2014, I think, is to speak with members of the National Assembly on the Guyana-Venezuela issue on territorial and security challenges. I was embarrassed at how deficits of knowledge existed on the part of Guyanese members of parliament about a territorial issue, about security issues. And I suspect that you have some similar vacuums of knowledge about things that members of parliament vote on, discuss. So I would say the onus is on the system to begin educating the people's representatives and impress upon those people's representatives that they're not there simply to cast a vote and say what a political party wants, whether you're in the opposition or the government. They should exercise agency and educate their constituents. The challenge is getting the people's representatives to be educated. And the challenge is also to enable the political environment to be comfortable with pushing back significantly. I am pleased that the pushback has been there on the oil sector. If we're taking government and industry to court, yes, rulings can be overturned at the appeals level and have been overturned recently. But I think it's a deeper than simply educating the general people. The challenge needs to begin by educating the representatives of people in the parliament, in the National Assembly.
Yeah. Timothy Jonas, how do we get this across to the people? How do we, they have to have a say. I mean, I just showed what's happening in the United States essentially any big expenditure has to have public hearings, parliamentary, in this case, the Senate hearings. But yet in Guyana, the 6+ seats, and I believe, if I'm not correct, I think Parliament was only called 3 or 4 times since it was convened. What's going on, Tim? What does the people do? Where do they go? A desperate cry, Tim.
You know, Nohar, the most successful revolution of the people that ever took place is the American Revolution. And the American Revolution is unique, and I believe it was successful for reasons, including these 2 reasons. First, it was a revolution not just of the man in the street, but of the middle class. So the leaders of that revolution were people who were genuinely competent to lead a country themselves. They understood the social systems, the social contract, the structures that needed to exist to run a country. Now, if you compare it to Arab Spring, where a lot of students and things marched up and down the place and overthrew the government, the next thing that happened is nobody knew what to do. So that very shortly afterwards, you had an equally oppressive government coming in. In the States, you had people of serious competence: Madison, Hancock, Washington, Monroe, Benjamin Franklin, that knew how to run a country. The other thing is that those people were already soldiers. The right to bear arms in America is not intended to protect yourself against a thief breaking in your door. It is intended to protect yourself against oppression from the government. It was understood that the people needed to be empowered so that they're not sheep, so that they had teeth, and if they were oppressed, they could defend themselves. Now, that's well and good in the 1700s when everybody got a musket. It's now impossible where, technology has made the military issues impossible to fight that kind of fight. But at the end of the day, Nohar, the only power that people have is the power that is exercised every 5 years when they vote. And if the options don't exist, then you have a tragedy in the making. And unfortunately in Guyana, because there has been 50 years of voting based on race distrust rather than on genuine competence, and the lingering after effects of that continue to today, you have seen a gradual but consistent decline in competence, decline in ability. And I think that even at the academic level, the level of academia, and I have huge respect for Ivlaw, but I'll ask him to consider this. There's a disconnect from practical reality. I heard Ivlaw talking about going to educate the people in Parliament. Now, for you to say to a leader, you need to be educated, is a good way to get yourself fired from whatever job you happen to be in. The only way a leader can be educated is if the leader recognizes in himself a deficiency. And I promise you, as the ancient Greeks said, democracy means leadership by the worst of us. And there's none of our leaders who will admit publicly or privately that they have any managerial deficiency or any intellectual or knowledge-based deficiency, so as to invite somebody to come to, quote, educate them. So the practicality of what's a noble sounding idea, oh, we must educate our leaders, it'll never happen. And I don't think that can be touted as a solution.
I'm not as pessimistic as Tim in that respect. You don't have to call it education to leaders. There are models elsewhere in the Caribbean. There are models in the United States. And we don't expect things in the United States to be to be emulated lock, stock, and barrel in other parts of the world. But there are sufficient opportunities for enhancing the capacity to exercise that leadership. And the first basis of that leadership is not simply to be voted in or to be appointed in, is to have some competence in regard to what you're supposed to do. And I would not put it past individuals in the current government who would recognize the need for them to enhance the ability of their own folks to do a better job rather than pretending to be doing a good job. So I don't be that pessimistic.
Yeah, yeah. Changes can start from within. And if you talk to some of these U.S. senators, they would say, to Tim's point, if there's a vacuum, who will fill that vacuum? Where are the leadership in Guyana? So on that note, I really want to turn to the young patriots of Guyana, living inside and outside of Guyana. A very good apostle from Nigeria, his name is Apostle Joshua Selma. He said it takes the same energy to go backward as it will take to go forward. So to Tim's point about the race voting in the past, to all the young patriots, Guyanese out there, you need to decide that energy that you have, because it'll take the same energy to go backward as it will take to go forward. And on that note there, I want to bring an end to that part of the program. I want to say that our next topic of discussion would be the Chinese contractors and the relationship with the Guyanese workers. But before we go there, I just want to be able to run this informative ad regarding Dr. Ivelaw Griffith book. Devin, could you please run that for us?
Oil is transforming Guyana, and the entire Caribbean is watching. But beneath the promise of prosperity lies a deeper risk, the rising threat of climate change. Oil and climate change in Guyana's wet neighborhood explores this high-stakes intersection of economics, politics, and the environment. Author Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith takes you inside the region's oil ambitions and reveals how climate vulnerability could shape its future. This isn't just a policy debate. It's about coastlines vanishing, livelihoods shifting, and choices that will define generations. Packed with insight, data, and sharp analysis, this book is essential reading for anyone who cares about the Caribbean's future. Are we on a path to progress or peril? Dive into the story that affects us all, Oil and Climate Change in Guyana's Wet Neighborhood by Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith.
Okay, so to all of our viewers, Dr. Ivelaw Griffith book is available on Amazon. Please, you could get your copy from Amazon. And also, if you need to contact Dr. Ivelaw Griffith, you could, email us at globespan247 or give us a call. In the public domain prior to election, there was a lot of talks about, the Chinese segment of Guyana not paying the taxes, numerous amounts of duty-frees that were extended to them. There was also a lot of talk prior to the election that a lot of those issues will be addressed. I don't know if any has been. I have not read much about it. There's also a lot of talk in the public domain about the abusive to the system by the Chinese contractors. So in that note there, I want to go to this video. This video was taken off of Teams Mohammed Facebook. So certainly we want to give credit to that, where we got the content from. So go ahead, Devin, could you play that video, please?
China Road and Bridge Corporation from Borbis again. The Chinese been taking tax and NIS from us for quite some time now. And we were only a few days ago we found out that they're not paying any NIS and tax, and it's been a lot of money. And now they doesn't have any answer for us. So we don't know what to do. We asking the higher authority to look into the matter for us, because we're pissed. We are people with families and kids, people got to go to school, and people get trained, got to go to school and stuff, and we can't do this here. It's a lot of money. Some people been paying $100 and something thousand in tax and NIS. Which part in Guyana? I don't know.
Okay. Now we've had these type of accusations, and certainly I did say that we got that clip out of Teams Mohammed on Facebook. There's also incidents, for example, Dr. Griffith, I know a guy personally, he's an expert in HVAC and went back to Guyana, is looking for retirement, sourcing places to live, etc. Came back, we met in New York, and I said to him, well, Guyana could certainly use someone of your talent. And he said, no way. He said the big contracts are given over to these Chinese companies, they're subcontracting smaller companies of Guyanese ownership, and the payments are next to nothing. So they just can't really make much money from that. That's one of his point. But I also want to bring up an article that the Chinese also have published, and this was in Cultural News. So on one hand, we're having all of these discussions, these accusations about they're not paying the NIS, the abusive labor practices, duty-free, undercutting on prices for trucking. But the Chinese Association, the Association of the Chinese Enterprise in Guyana, and this came out of Cultural News May 13th, on Tuesday dismissed claims that the Chinese are taking away jobs from the Guyanese. The association in a statement refuted the allegation that locals have only themselves to blame as they refuse to work on weekends and holidays, and that this affect project schedules for Chinese company. They also went on to talk about they bring in their own trucks and their own labors, etc. And they said, however, the Chinese Association made it clear that its members have always operated in compliance with local laws and regulations. But Dr. Griffith, I mean, from your viewpoint and from what you've read and what you've seen in the public domain and people that you talk with, what is your take on this?
Guyana is not the only society in the region, in the hemisphere, actually, the Americas, where there's a certain sense of an invasion of the Chinese, so to speak. And I'll tell you an experience I had in China itself once, which partly reflects this concern not only in the Americas. I was then at the University of Guyana, and University of Guyana has a Confucius Institute. And once a year, the heads of all the universities around the world with Confucius Institutes attend a conference in China. And I was on a panel. I remember this panel distinctly. Guyana was on this panel. The United States was a university president from New Jersey on this panel. And there was an African vice chancellor on this panel. And one of the questions from the audience at the end of the formal presentations had to do with what is the experience of your people with regard to the Chinese involvement in your society. And I'll tell you what this vice chancellor said. He paused for a while, then he said, some of my people say we were once colonized by the French. We were once colonized by the British, or people are wondering whether the Chinese are the new colonizers. He and I had a sidebar after that session, and he felt compelled to share the concerns not only in the capital of the society, I'm not going to call the country, it's a West African country, but what appeared to him to be a complicity on the part of some of the government elites and the Chinese to let some of the Chinese businessmen get away with murder, so to speak. And I wonder whether or not, and I know for a fact, many other parts of the Americas, there is this significant presence, not only undermining best practices with regard to labor and employment, undermining the ability of significant elements of the society to get a decent existence given the competition that's there. And I think the onus is on the Guyanese authorities to do justice to the Guyanese citizens. Yes, we want foreign investors, small and big, from other parts of the world, from any part of the world, but operating in the basis of not discriminating against the citizens of the nation. So I don't know the specifics of this case in regard to NIS and other payment. But I know from the time I've been in Guyana, and I had the opportunity to visit very many parts of Guyana where there are Chinese operations in mining, in fishing, not simply in the Georgetown in Region 4. It's a cause for concern as someone in the diaspora, because I've seen how injurious to the good social health some practices of Chinese can be in other parts of the world.
Yeah, and Ms. Laura George, our message is an active campaign is needed to empower the citizens of Guyana on their rights and on the elements of good governance. Then going forward, develop user-friendly guidelines to understand these mega projects and what it means for the future of generation, if implements well, or the outcome of substantial work. So, Tim, what's your take on this situation that we have within the context of the Chinese issue?
We like blaming other people for our own shortcomings, don't we? Somebody who speaks a different language, not English, comes into this country and by some means gets into business and builds roads, builds houses, builds schools, whatever they do, and makes money in circumstances where us Guyanese haven't been able to do it. And we talk about invasions and preference and that kind of thing, and in language that often, especially in the public domain, leads to insightful racism. So the Chinese influence in Guyana started before World War II. It was made larger during World War II. A lot of Chinese ran away from the Japanese invasion of Manchuria and came to Guyana. So that a lot of the Chinese Guyanese that we see, and we're familiar with the names that we know about, came to Guyana from those times and assimilated and are as Guyanese as you or me, more than you know her, you're not here, but as Guyanese as the rest of us. And they have been a thriving, excellent part of our society. They have been clever in commerce. They brought their culture. I've had Chinese food in London and New York, and I'll tell you, Guyanese Chinese food is the best Chinese food I've had. They have opened shops and they've opened businesses, and nothing's wrong with any of that. So where really is the problem? And let me tell you what I think the problem is. The problem is that our management of our country is so pitiful, it's so pathetic, that we fail to realize that the regulatory function of government is to make sure that people obey the rules so that they encourage business, they encourage entrepreneurship, but they also ensure that the rules are followed. The head of Baishanlin was a Chinese national, got Guyanese citizenship. How on earth did that happen? Because our system is rotten. Our mining structure contemplates that for small and medium-sized mines, only Guyanese can go out there and mine. But we have been giving Guyanese citizenship, not just to Chinese nationals, but Brazilian nationals and all other kind of nationals, and pretending it's a good thing. We have completely failed to understand that with the advent of oil and gas, we are now in demand and carpetbaggers will be coming to this country. And we have to change the rules and protect Guyanese interests so that Guyanese remain first-class citizens in our country. We have to ensure that tax regimes are preferential to Guyanese citizens. We have to make it difficult for non-Guyanese to get Guyanese citizenship. It's already too late for the leader of Baishanlin. He's a Guyanese, can't take that away. It's already too late for so many more that now carry Guyanese passports and therefore can go and mine. Whereas that should have been the province of a Guyanese citizen, and they should be renting that from Guyanese. We should have laws that restrict foreign ownership of real estate in Guyana. We don't have that. So when we talk about the invasion, look, when a large contract is awarded, it is awarded, if it's done properly, to the best qualifying bidder who bids the lowest. And I don't care if that's a Martian or a Russian or a Vietnamese or a Chinese, that's who should get it. And if that Martian flies all the way here from Mars and can still bid cheaper than somebody who is here on the ground, then that says a lot. And it doesn't say a lot negatively about the foreign, it says a lot negatively about us. But when they get that job, if the government is not ensuring that they pay their GPL bill, that their employees have visas to come here and work, and that the visa structure is paid for so that they're paying for visas, that the tax rates are higher for foreigners, so that if you need an engineer, it is actually more economically feasible, beneficial to look for a Guyanese engineer because the tax regime is preferential to him. So to give Guyanese an advantage in the work market, to ensure that NIS is paid, PAYE is paid, and to punish defaulters. And if the defaulters are foreign, to punish them more harshly. We don't do that. So we talk about this Chinese company, Chinese-owned company that has not been remitting the NIS payments. Let me ask you, you think Guyanese employers are very good about paying NIS on their employees? Because I promise you they're not. So the reason they're not is not because those people are terrible. It's because the system has not been enforced and is woefully inept, and the management of our country and at that level in terms of regulating NIS obligations, regulating tax obligations is woeful. We have to look at our own house. We have to grow up. We have to put on our big boy shoes, and we have to do our job properly, running the country and regulating things and making effective laws and enforcing them in a way that creates a level playing field and encourages business. We're not doing that.
Yeah, well, Timothy Jonas' comments is a mixed bag. Spoke about many different aspects of it. One of the things that happen in the United States, for example, if you're contributing to Social Security, you get a letter periodically from Social Security reflecting your balance. So if it is that NIS could find a way to be able to advise each contributor what the net amount is in their accounts, that could be a way of also having visibility if, and it is, employers are actually contributing. But mixed bags that came out of Timothy Jonas. I want to go to the next program, but I need to read a couple of comments. Atlantic Chauffeur said, totally agree with Dr. Griffith, hard facts. And I believe it was yes, Neville Sital, which I'm hoping I could address at the ending of the program. He says 60 years already gone is when Guyanese will achieve education to understand who they really are. And to that point, Neville Sital, I'm not sure the Guyanese are also starting from a level playing field. Some of these Chinese companies, they're highly subsidized by the government and certainly supported in this sort of multinational expansion that they're doing from the government side. But going to Tim's point as well, he mentioned that our side need proper legislation and enforcement of legislation and laws. Going to the next topic, I'm just going to try to rush through this point here. And after this, I want to be able to get some sort of a visionary comment from Dr. Ivelaw regarding our going into our next 60 years, and certainly from Timothy Jonas as well. Devin, could you just bring up that slide? Now, this slide, to all of our viewers, is in the context of mega projects being built. So on one hand, we have all of these trillion, not that slide, Devin, the one about citizen impatient for faster results. So we have trillions of dollars in infrastructure expansion, and then we also have our domain, that is Guyana, that we are having others come into the country also, which is nothing wrong with that. But certainly there need to be a level playing field for Guyanese workers and subcontractors. And here we are on this slide. Devon, you have it, the one citizen impatient for faster results. Okay, so maybe I could just read it. It's an article that came out of Newsroom, and it says citizen impatience for faster results, government accelerating response. Vice President Jack Day on Monday said the government is intensifying efforts to address long-standing community concern, including drainage, garbage collection, street lighting, security, and housing, as hundreds of citizens turn up at ministerial outreach seeking solutions to everyday issues affecting their lives. Now, speaking on the sidelines of the outreach, Jack Day said that while many persons attended to seek updates on government contracts and procurement opportunities, a significant number also raised concerns about their condition in their communities and access to government services. So, Dr. Griffith, they're supposed to be showing up for contracts or subcontracts, but yet what's on our people's mind is their well-being, their affordability, their way of life. And that, when you take it in the context of trillions, I mean, what's our total budget now in terms of how much from since oil has been above ground? I mean, it's some trillion Guyana dollars. And yet we have our people, instead of, the priority should be, are we getting a contracts? Are we bidding a contracts? But they're saying, no, we need you to fix the issues in our community, in our lives, the flooding, etc., and etc. So how do you take that away, Dr. Griffith?
Well, I'm going to use the opportunity, since we're almost at the end of the program, to connect to what you would ask to do by way of a visionary contribution. And I want to offer a two-part input. Here's the first part. We're celebrating a 60th year where we don't have the luxury of just resting on our laurels and basking in the glory of what we've achieved and failed to achieve in the last 60 years. We have an obligation to look forward to see how we can leave a progeny in a better condition than we inherited the nation, whether we live within the confines of the geography of the nation or outside of it. And that leads me to want to reflect on the paradox that Guyana is living. And it's a paradox that says we have this golden product, this black gold, this bounty that can transform our society and help the region writ large. But at the same time, the oil we're producing is contributing to the very global warming that is affecting the whole global commons. And so the paradox is, how do we manage our society to enable greater rewards than risks? We don't have the luxury of not producing the oil, but we have an obligation to manage the results of that production in a way in which the future that will come after 2026 will be helpful because of what we have done, rather than hurt by what we have done. That paradox, managing that paradox for me is part of the challenge of recognizing a 60th independence anniversary. And let me offer, by way of my second and final input, the words of a distinguished Guyanese poet who's been living in the UK for a number of years, John Agard. And as I reflect, and I have John Agard's poem in my book, the last chapter, because the point I make there, and I think the point that is reflective of the reality of this paradox, is that we should be looking to the people who are going to be succeeding us and how well can we enable them to be good stewards and beneficiaries of the product we have right now in Guyana. And John calls his poem Inheritance. Let me read you that poem. If we, the children of the meek, should inherit an earth whose rainforest lungs breathe a tale of waste, an earth where the ailing sea shudders at its own slip, if we, the children of the meek, should inherit an earth where the grass grows nostalgic at the mere mention of green, and the sky looks out of its depth when reminded of blue, if we, the children of the meek, should inherit an earth, then we ask of the future one question, says John. Should we dance or break into gnashing of teeth at the news of our inheritance? This is a time for us to not only bask in the glory of what we have and where we've come from, the journey of 6 decades. It's a time for us to focus on our inheritance, the people who will come after us, the kind of society that we are wanting to set the stage for them to further develop. Inheritance is the word I want to leave with us, Nohar.
Very powerful, and certainly a decision has to be made by this coming generation. Do we go back into a divisionist type of politics, or do we move forward to a place where country is foremost and the equity for all people will be our foremost. Timothy Jonas, it has been 2020, oil above ground, $6 trillion later. Here we have some of our folks that supposedly going to an event that has to be with getting subcontracts or being able to get some sort of a business as their livelihood, but their major concern was drainage, garbage collection, street lighting, security, housing. Hundreds of citizens turned up at the ministerial outreach to discuss that when we are spending billions and billions of dollars. At the same time, the human infrastructure is not being built to the extent where Guyanese people could be at the level of happiness. Where do you see it for the next 60 years? Incorporate that as well into your closing comments.
So, as you know, I always talk about systems. So rapid growth will have growth pains, no doubt about it. So when you're building roads, people will be inconvenienced. When, hopefully sometime in the future, in the near future, we see fixing of drains, people will be inconvenienced. There's no doubt about that. But the everyday needs of the people that you're talking about has not been met in Guyana and has not been met in my lifetime in Guyana. We have always had blackout. We've gone from sporadic water to now every single house has an overhead black tank or a pressure pump. We've gone from reliance on the NDC supplied rubbish disposal to paying Buran's brothers RC1s for rubbish disposal. So nothing works. There was a time that the MCC, if you're in town, or the NDC would have people cutting the grass on your parapet. That is now unheard of. It simply doesn't happen. So there's been this decline in the provision of services. And the mistake that is made by the sheep who look to their single shepherd is that this is a government thing. If you try to repose responsibility for every last thing in one president and one vice president, you're asking for the impossible, and you're demonstrating that you don't even understand the problem. This is the problem, Noah. The problem is that structurally, as a system administratively, power must devolve to sub-agencies. That is why we have regions, 10 regions, and that's why in each region we have NDCs. And that's why in the large towns we have town councils. So power devolves to them. And the social contract is you pay rates and taxes to those local agencies, and they provide you with the rubbish disposal, your drain cleanup, your secondary roads and that kind of thing. And that's fallen down completely. And government likes it like that. Every government in Guyana has always liked it like that because it means absolute power goes back to the government. When what should be happening is strengthening the system that empowers the municipal bodies, empowers the NDCs. I need to be able to go to my NDC and say, why haven't you come last Tuesday to collect garbage? I don't do that. Right now, I pay more for garbage collection than I pay in rates and taxes because the whole system has fallen down. So the social structure must recognize that I must pay fair taxes, fair rates, and I must get a fair service for that. That has collapsed. It collapsed since the 80s, and that is what needs to be restored as a system. Until we understand that and we act to make it happen, we will continue going down the same road.
Yeah, and to Mr. Christopher Wilson comment, it has NDC and RDC officials and other local government officials. They all have to design a well-structured strategic plan on how to deal with major issues affecting the various communities. For example, permanent cleaning, gangs to maintain the cleanliness of the drainage to reduce floods. To your point, Timothy Jonas, a couple of additional comments from Globespan. It is our sincere hope that Globespan programs will transmit a sense of conviction to change from within so we could all affect outward changes that would benefit Guyana and its people. We also hope the information from these programs will be a catalyst for improvement and positive changes for all Guyanese. Our program keeps advocating for changes from within first, rather than us just looking to change from one side to the other. So on this note here, I really want to thank Devin Bissoon. He's always been a really big, ardent supporter and really a backbone of Globespan 24/7. We thank him. Dr. Griffith, I really, on behalf of the viewers of Globespan, it's really been a stretch for you to join us tonight. I was elated when you answered, yes, you will be able to be on with us, and we wish you more speedy and healthy recovery. We thank you very much. And for sure, Mr. Timothy Jonas, you are a true cornerstone of Globespan, and we hope that we all will be able to continue the efforts here. I should be back on next Wednesday. We had a little mix-up over the 5 Wednesdays in April leading into to May, but looking forward to continue with the Globespan programs every Wednesday. To all our viewers, to our guests tonight, thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you, Nohar. Thank you,
I wish
David.
you well. Please look after yourself.
Thank you much.